Hey guys, so I wanted to address a comment on my last video that I thought was pretty insightful and raised some pretty pertinent points, as they call them. So let's get into it. So Ben Collins, 8888, says, I can handle the study, I can enjoy the work, but the job hunting and interview process sounds like a whole different beast. It sounds like coders are always looking every few years, too. So, yeah, the study and the work are definitely 100% necessary. Those allow you to build the foundation to bring something to the table, so to speak, for the interviews. The trouble is, a lot of people will just give up on learning to program. Um, they're busy. Um, they may just have these crazy expectations. Not to say like they're mentally ill, but the the expectations are just so out of line with the reality of the work and the reality of building skills that it's kind of catastrophic for them emotionally, especially if they don't have a community, which is really, really important, I think, in any endeavor, but especially when you're undergoing something difficult and challenging. Sometimes you need a battle buddy, so to speak, to just, share ideas and feelings with. Um, so yeah, if you can get through that, you're ready to go. The job hunting and interview process, I guess it is a different beast, but 99.9% of the time you'll be interviewing with someone who's been on a dev team, and usually they're in the upper echelons of the dev team, so they're going to be a senior dev or a staff engineer, and they know what they're looking for, and they're going to ask you questions that will give them an impression if you're ready or not. And, a lot of times, well, probably all the time in this case, they will have kind of checked you out first based on your online footprint before you ever get an email or a phone call. And usually what they're looking for is, it's not always someone who's just ready to dive straight into the position and be productive from day one. They're looking for people who have like the right type of mindset, which is usually like a natural sense of curiosity and a genuine interest in the work, and then someone who they can work with, on a personal level, and also someone who's coachable. So they'll often get a pretty good idea of your development skills based on your GitHub, and it's just like reading a paper someone has written. You can get a fairly good idea of how well they can express themselves and construct ideas in whatever language the paper is written in. And there's obviously like a very big difference between someone who's like in elementary school, first grade, or sixth grade, or junior high school, or someone who's a PhD. So reading someone's code is very similar to that. So, there's nothing really to be intimidated by. They already know who you are. As long as you can answer questions and hold a conversation, you can do it. Excuse me. What is difficult about it is the sheer amount of rejection you deal with, and that's true, I think, in any job search. Although I feel like native speakers in Japan have it a bit easier, because a lot of times, especially outside of the big cities, you're not going up against a huge pool of qualified talent. It's more like you're a native teacher and they probably already want you, especially if you know somebody. It's not always the case, but I've gotten numerous phone calls over the years from different English schools around asking, like, do you know of anyone who's available, anybody at all? So the bar is a bit lower because in that case the ratio of supply to demand is much more in favor of the supply. The fewer qualified people there are around, then the more, I wouldn't say valuable because they don't pay very much, but the easier it's going to be to get a job. In software development, the competition is definitely more fierce, but it doesn't mean you can't find a way in. It just means it's going to take a bit longer. And what I found through my own experience is just don't overinvest emotionally in any given opportunity. It's a really big mistake because you could have the most amazing interview with someone, get invited back. You know, some companies will interview you up to 6 or 7 times before they either give you an offer or reject you. So it's a very involved process, and it can be extremely disappointing to think you have a position when you don't. So, and I've just gone through this myself just in the past couple months. I basically spent my summer on the job search. And so I've been there. This is me sharing my IT experience in Japan. So, you know, just the best thing you can do when you are looking for work is just apply to as many positions as you can, and just make sure you have a strong resume, a strong portfolio. And this one's overlooked a lot, but the ability to explain how your applications work is extremely important, because a lot of the impression they get of your understanding of programming logic and how web applications work will be based on how well you're able to walk people through the source code you have in your GitHub repositories. And I remember years ago, it was my first real tech interview. I'd only been in the programming course for, I think it was around 3 or 4 months. And it was, I wasn't ready, but I managed to land an interview. They liked what they saw based on my only full stack web project I had deployed, which I also had a lot of help on. And they liked what they saw on my blog, and they thought, okay, this guy might be a good candidate. And then when it came time to interview, I mean, I was just, that's probably I've never crashed and burned like that since. But we need these experiences, and I remember reaching out to that recruiter afterwards and just saying, could you give me some tips? What thank you. Let me know how it's going, and is there anything you could share on how I can improve? And he basically said, we liked you, but it was pretty clear you were a beginner, and because you weren't able to really walk us through the application, you seemed a little bit kind of not ready, was the gist of it. And also, part of it was that the course I was in jumped immediately into a pretty intimidating library called React, and skipped over a lot of the basics of programming in JavaScript. So, which is a perfect example of why you need the foundation, because anyone out there can just copy and paste an application, or I should say copy a repository for an application and claim it as their own. There's no law against that. It's all open source on GitHub if it's a public library repository. So yeah, it is a different beast, but it's a necessary step, and it doesn't have to be as intimidating as you might feel. It actually feels kind of good to be interviewing and making progress, and it's a numbers game. The more you expose yourself to opportunities, the higher your chances are of finally kind of landing one for yourself. And you get better at interviewing. You get better at talking about yourself, and whatever crazy questions they ask you. Tell us about a time you faced a challenge and were successful. Stuff like that. So it's just part of the deal, and everyone has a different style, but it's just, if you can talk to people, if you can explain your work, you're good. All right. So the second point was, it sounds like coders are always looking every few years. It sounds like coders are always looking every few years too. Okay. So I'm assuming that means looking for a new position, and that's, there's a couple factors going on there. Up until very recently, like last summer of 2022, the United States economy, at least, saw like one of the longest runs in tech hiring ever. It was basically after 2008, when the financial crisis happened. The U.S. economy kind of revamped, and put a large emphasis on tech, and tech companies also just, I think a lot of their products and services kind of became more mature. So we saw Facebook, Amazon, Google just providing all of these amazing products and services, and so it naturally followed that they needed people for that. And also the rise of smartphones, I think, helped a lot because people spent way more time on the internet shopping and scrolling and chatting and so on and so forth. And that kind of came crashing down, or some people would have you believe, starting kind of early fall of 2022. But it's just a business cycle. Tech's not going anywhere. We may not have, Google hiring 10,000 people a year at $150,000 per year plus. I mean, things ebb and flow. So layoffs are part of the work, and normally companies will give you a pretty decent severance package as part of the deal, because if you're on that kind of career path, they respect your efforts, and they don't want to just drop you. So it's hard being laid off, but I don't know. I mean, it varies, but a good percentage of tech workers out there have been laid off before. It's part of the beast. And I was told by one recruiter, I remember, because I was really feeling just like, so stressed out. Like, I've got 3 kids, no job, all of a sudden I'm living off this severance package. And the recruiter said, just look at getting laid off as a blip, right? You have the skills, you have professional experience. Someone's going to want you. So there's that. Getting laid off happens pretty frequently in tech. Depending if you're in a startup or a bigger company, there's a lot of different reasons. But also, at least in the U.S., there's a lot of people job hop because it normally means a new position will pay you more than your previous position. So I've heard of people, changing jobs every 6 months, once a year, every 2 years. And it was particularly prevalent in the software development community because what would happen is, you'd come in as a beginner, you land your first role, and you kind of learn the ropes and get better, but you still have the same salary. So if you're working for company A, they might promise like a 6-month or a biannual salary review and like a max of like, say, 5% pay increase, maybe something like 10%, but that's pretty rare. So it's usually more profitable to just go to a different company because they can start you out at a higher salary, and sometimes considerably higher. So that's the thinking there. So that kind of explains that. The interview process, I think, for any industry is always a little bit stressful. Maybe native English teachers in Japan have it a bit easier than other folks, but that's really just because you are over here, I've known many people who've gone through the rigmarole, if that's a word, of interviewing. I've done it myself. I've probably done well over 100 interviews by now, I would say. And, from that, over the past few years, I've gotten 3 different offers. So that's pretty normal. A lot has to come together interviewing, and I can maybe in future videos talk about the specifics and kind of game plans and what to say and what not to say and so forth. And then, job hopping is just part of the beast. If, company A was good to start out with, but you're looking at company B and they're paying 25% more, and you're now a more seasoned developer, why not, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Although in Japan, some companies might not like that, which is why I really suggest focusing on international companies. The last Japanese company I worked for was full-time, at least, was in 2014. I left there in early September of 2014. So it's been a solid 9 years, and I'm not going back. I just It's nothing against Japanese people. On a social level, most of them are awesome. It's just the culture, and especially the work culture. It's just takes a lot out of people, and I haven't really met that many Japanese people who disagree with me. Some people get lucky, but by and large, the work culture in Japan is very strict and very very taxing. And then it's a lot of things are compounded if you're a foreigner, except of course if you're an English teacher, because they need native English teachers, and they, in my experience, you kind of just get relegated, like a piece of furniture or a trophy horse or something. It's not a very sincere type of relationship. So anyways, I hope that's helpful. And if you have any other questions, as always, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and we can take it from there. Alrighty, until next time.